check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Hi, so I just realized that I forgot to film an intro, and basically this video is going to be about things I wish I knew prior to going to medical school in the Philippines. And so this video is intended for US citizens who have graduated from undergrad already or are about to graduate from undergrad and are considering going to medical school in the Philippines. And hopefully you find this video helpful and that you learn something from this. Alright, so let's get this video started. Sorry if I'm going to be looking down. My script is in my iPad here. And let me get comfortable real quick and we'll start. This video is titled Things I Wish I Knew Before I Went to Medical School in the Philippines. And this is going to be specific to where I actually went to medical school, which is the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. Alright, so number one, where do you want to practice? So for me, I wanted to practice in the US, but I also wanted to have a license in the Philippines. And that's because I wanted to have a future where I could potentially retire in the Philippines and work there as a general practitioner. I'm envisioning a small rural town, preferably near my hometown in the Philippines, and practicing in a small clinic there. And so that's the first thing that you should think about when deciding whether to go to medical school outside of the United States. If you're already a US citizen, you went to undergrad in the US and are considering going to medical school. And so the next thing that you should consider is how decided you are in medicine in general. So if at this point you're watching this video and you've already confirmed within yourself that you are going to become a doctor in the future and you're going to commit the rest of your life to the practice of medicine, or at the very least a very good chunk of your life to the practice of medicine, and if you're sure, then by all means go for it, going to medical school. But in terms of going to medical school abroad or going to a non-US medical school, assuming that you want to practice in the US, you have to consider that coming back to the US from a foreign medical school is incredibly difficult, especially if you didn't come from a better known or a more well-established medical school from abroad. And there's different hierarchies in terms of which medical schools would be more favorable. And this is just like observational or like anecdotal evidence that I've just seen through the internet. But there's inherent biases, all right, and that's a topic to be discussed in a different video, probably not this one. I don't think this is the right place to be discussing that deep of a topic, and I'm not as well versed or an expert in that topic to begin with, so I don't think I'm the right authority to be talking about that. I can only talk about my own experiences and my own insights from what I have experienced myself and from what I've seen or read about other people experiencing. And so that's point number two. And then the third thing that you need to consider is something called a return service agreement. This is particularly for the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. And so this is not a shocker to anyone who's considering of applying to the University of the Philippines, because this is something that you need to sign upon admission, and it's something that's already discussed in the application process as well. And so when you interview for the medical school, they're going to be asking about your plans regarding that as well. And so it's not a shocker at all that this thing exists. It's called the return service obligation. And basically what it is, for those who are unaware, you are contracted to doing 3 years of service, return service, to the Philippines after you graduate from the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. And so you have 5 years after your graduation to complete this 3 years of return service. So theoretically, you can use the first 2 years to be taking your board exams in other countries that you wish to practice in if you don't wish to practice in the Philippines after you've served those 3 years. Or you could go ahead and apply to residency in the Philippines and fulfill your 3 years return service obligation. Another option of that is pay your way out of it, essentially. The caveat is that if you want to do the first option that I mentioned, where you do the first 2 years of doing exams and then going back to the Philippines to do your return service, the caveat is that you have to pay the full amount of the return service obligation through the escrow account that you make with the school and with the Development Bank of the Philippines, which is a government-owned bank in the country. And you basically have to have that money in as a form of collateral in case that you don't decide to go back to the Philippines after your 2 years is up, or rather, after your 5 years is up for the return service obligation. And so this is a lot of nuances that you can talk to the return service office about in the Philippines, in the University of the Philippines particularly. And as far as other medical schools in the Philippines, I'm not sure if others do have something similar. The reason why this exists for the University of the Philippines is because your tuition as a medical student is incredibly subsidized. You pay cents on the dollar to go to medical school in a very well-respected and renowned training institution in the Philippines. It's regarded by most as one of, if not the top-ranking training institution for medical school students and residents and fellows, etc. And so having that privilege of attending such a well-renowned institution in the country for, again, pennies to the dollar in comparison to even other medical schools in the Philippines, which are considerably cheaper than medical schools in the United States, you have to have that sort of agreement in order to ensure that the Philippines is not wasting that slot in their medical school on someone who's just gonna up and leave and not practice in the Philippines at all. And so with that said, I graduated in 2023. I've already taken USMLE Steps 1 and 2 CK, so that means that I did have to pay the agreement to kind of renege myself from the contract. And I still have, at this point, about 4.5 years to complete the 3 years of service that I'm subjected to due to the contract that I signed. And I'm not sure currently if I'm gonna go back to the Philippines and do that. I'm going to exhaust all my options here in the United States first prior to deciding to go back to the Philippines. But basically what will happen is if I do end up completing that 3 years return service, I can basically recoup the money that I've put down into an escrow account and just get all that money back. And if I do not complete the 3 years, then that money is just gonna go to the school, go away, essentially. And so it's not an amount of money that's negligible, it's actually a pretty substantial amount of money. And so that puts pressure on me to do well and either get a residency in the US right away so that I could start earning money and pay off that debt that I have towards my parents, because my parents were the ones who shouldered that expense. Or I could suck it up and go back to the Philippines and practice there for 3 years as a general practitioner, or just any capacity in the medical field as a physician, and get that money back for my parents. And so it's still an option. I still do have about 4.5 years to consider what I'm gonna do with that. But yeah, that's kind of the situation with that. I know that was very long-winded explanation, but I wanted to dwell on that aspect of going to medical school in the Philippines, particularly UP College of Medicine, because that's such an important factor to consider, and I wish I would have considered it more thoughtfully. I knew about it before I applied because my brother had applied to UP College of Medicine the year prior to when I applied. I didn't realize how heavy the cost would become through inflation and through change of administrations throughout the years, but it's a really hefty cost, and I don't want to put it on blast or anything because I don't think it's appropriate to do so, but do know that it exists, and that that's something that you should definitely consider. The amount, though, in retrospect, it's still considerably cheaper than going to medical school in the United States and getting all that student debt on yourself. So make of that what you will. Okay, the next point is, I wish I would have known about the existence of networking groups in other medical schools that kind of make the pipeline towards applying to residency in the United States a little bit easier. I know that schools like UERM or UST have a more established pathway for students like myself who were American citizens and went back to the Philippines for medical school and attempted to apply to residency in the United States, as well as for Filipino students who just really want to migrate out of the Philippines and go to residency in the US. And so the University of the Philippines, unfortunately, doesn't have that sort of pipeline or pathway. And especially during the years that I was in medical school, because it was affected by COVID, the systems that have been set up prior to COVID were there. Like, there were ways for me to get like elective clerkships prior to starting my own clerkship in the Philippines in abroad countries like United States, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, etc. Those systems were in place and had partnerships with the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. However, because the pandemic hit, a lot of those opportunities went poof because of travel restrictions, COVID restrictions, etc. And so it kind of screwed not only me, but like everybody else who was within the second, third, and fourth years of medical school. First, second, third years of medical schools that were affected by the 2020 pandemic. And so, yeah, it's an unfortunate reality that hopefully you won't have to deal with in the future, but it's definitely something that has negatively impacted my ability to get elective clerkships as a medical student. And so now that's biting me in the ass a little bit now that I'm trying to apply for residency in the United States. So the next thing is networking. I mentioned it already, but knowing your network is incredibly important. If you have access to an alumni of that medical school that you're trying to go to, whether it be University of the Philippines or other medical school like UST, Ateneo, and the like, please talk to them about that sort of stuff, like networking and being able to have an alumni association that you can join potentially as an alumni yourself once you get to that point, because networking is incredibly important in your quest for applying to residency in the United States. Fortunately, I did join a medical sorority in the University of the Philippines, and that network, because sorority and we had a counterpart fraternity as well. So sorority and fraternity members do practice in the United States, and so that's how I was able to get my network here in the US. And so the next point is, I wish I would have known the way of living in Manila. And if you're like me and you're not from Manila originally, it's gonna be a culture shock for you. Like if you're a generation 1.5 immigrant like myself, even if you've had an existence in the United States in a very big, very crowded, very polluted city, Manila is a different beast. I myself grew up in a very small town, or what used to be a very small town in the Philippines, in the southern part of the Philippines. Definitely wasn't used to that sort of overcrowded situation. It's like a stimulus overload every single time I go outside. And I got used to it eventually, but if that's something that's going to negatively affect your mental health, your physical health, please do consider it, because you are going to be constricting yourself to 5 years of your life not 5 years consecutively, because you'll have breaks for school breaks and all that stuff, but it's still gonna be a large chunk of your life spent in one of the most overpopulated, polluted, loud, incredibly hot, humid area. And if that's something that you can't get used to, please don't do it. You'll just end up being miserable and you'll hate every second of it, and it's not gonna be good. Now, for me personally, I have a very high tolerance for those kinds of situations. I don't particularly mind living in a sketchy neighborhood or having to deal with pollution, noise pollution, overcrowdedness. It is, like I said, it's like a stimulus overload the first time you get there, but you'll get used to it eventually. And so it helps once you start medical school and you start making friends, because then they'll help you navigate, because most likely these people that you're gonna meet are from the undergrad majors in University of the Philippines, Manila. And so they're gonna be well versed about the campus, if you could even call it a campus. And they're gonna know how to live life effectively in that small pocket of Manila that you're going to be in. And you're going to realize as you live longer and longer in Manila that there are pockets of Manila that look like first world nations, and then there are pockets of Manila that definitely look like developing nations. And unfortunately, the University of the Philippines, Manila is right smack dab in the middle of that pocket of Manila, of one of those pockets in Manila where it could be better. Yeah. All right, let's leave it at that. And so next thing to bring up is the state of the teaching hospital that you're going to be working in as a clerk, as an intern, because that's also going to affect your mental and physical health as you progress through your years in medical school. And so you're exposed to that hospital pretty early on. Actually, you'll end up being in large groups with fellow medical students, meeting with preceptors in the hospital within your very first year of medical school. And so you'll get exposed to the wards pretty early, you'll get to interview patients pretty early, obviously in larger groups so that it's like a learning experience for everyone. But definitely, if you can, try to visit the hospital. It's open to the public, so you can definitely just go in there and see for yourself what it's like. It'd be better if you could have someone who's been in the Philippine General Hospital, like as a student or as a resident or whatever, show you around so that you can have a better insight about it. Like, for example, you know an alumni or are friends with someone who's currently working in the Philippine General Hospital. That'll be a way for you to get a really good insight, firsthand knowledge of what it's like in that hospital, because pictures don't do it justice in terms of like what it really feels like when you're in the wards or in the call rooms or whatever. Now, in terms of being able to access the call rooms as like a civilian or an outsider, you're probably not allowed to do that, but at the very least you can see the interior of the hospital, like the lobby area or like the reception area, just the ambiance of the hospital itself, and really soak it in, because it is a very, I don't know how to put it in words, but it's an experience. It was an experience, and I'm glad for it. I don't think that I'll ever get an experience like that again, mostly because I probably wouldn't put myself in that position again, but it was definitely a learning experience for me. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is that 5 years is an incredibly long time, especially if you're already in a relationship with a significant other. You're gonna be doing 5 years long distance, assuming you don't break up. And I've seen that happen. I've seen people who were in long distance international relationships with people who've ended up breaking up with their significant others in my class. And it's just the way it is, you know. If it's something that's not super important to you, like if you're not 100% committed to your significant other anyways, or maybe you don't have a significant other, then this might not be that much of a concern for you. But It's going to be 5 years spent away from your family and your friends. I mean, you're going to make friends there too, but away from your nuclear family, assuming your nuclear family lives in the United States. And you're only going to have access to extended family, if you even have extended family in Manila. So it's definitely something to consider, because your support system is going to be the most important thing that'll get you through medical school in the Philippines, or medical school in general. But definitely a very good support system is really, really important. Knowing how long you'll be away from the support system that you already have is also something important to consider. So next is, what specialty do you want to pursue in the future? So this applies to everybody who's considering going to medical school outside of the United States, because as an international medical graduate, the chances of you getting into the specialty that you really want, assuming that it's not family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, or whatever, the chances of you getting into that specialty that you really, really want is very low. Not to be like a downer or put a dampener on your aspirations and your goals, but it's just the truth of the matter. I'm struggling with it now because my top choice of specialty isn't family medicine or internal medicine or pediatrics or emergency medicine even. And so that's kind of really bumming me out recently, because I knew it was hard, but I didn't know it would be this hard. And so living it now, living the hardships now, I wish I would have known about it more or researched about it more prior to committing myself to going to medical school in the Philippines, because had I known how much hardships or how much money, time, and effort it's going to take in order to land a residency program, not even in like the residency program of your dreams, but just a residency program in the United States as an international medical graduate, is incredibly difficult. Like, the statistics are against us. And even though they say that it gets better every year, the statistics don't lie. It's still almost a 50-50 odds. And that's not comforting. Think about that really hard, do some introspection, and don't rush into going to medical school because, I don't know, pressure from yourself or pressure from your family. Really think about it, because it's your life in the end. And if you're okay with struggling for another couple of years after you graduate med school before you end up in the residency that you want, go for it. But if you're not willing to do that, then maybe reconsider your choices. Lastly is pretty much, how hard do you want to work? And so I remember back when I was in undergrad at UCLA, I asked for advice from some professors about considering going to medical school outside of the United States, particularly in the Philippines, where I'm originally from. And so professors, medical students that I've spoken to all told me that it was going to be a bad idea, because as soon as I try to come back in the United States for residency, the barriers in my way are going to be incredibly difficult to get through. And at that time, I took it as a challenge, and I wanted to prove to them that I could do it, you know, like despite all the hardships that they were telling me that exist, that I will prove them wrong and I can do it. And right now, just a reality check, right now it's really hard. Even without like inherent kind of biases against foreign grads in terms of getting a residency spot, there's so many hoops that you have to go through as an IMG. A lot of that takes money and time and effort. And if that's something that you're not willing to give for your dreams of becoming a doctor in the US, then maybe it's not for you. Becoming an IMG is probably not for you. And you're going to be sacrificing a lot throughout this whole journey. And yeah, it's the unfortunate truth of it all. In the end though, nobody actually cares where you got your degree or your training from, unless you want to go to an academic program or a very prestigious program. in the end, if you just want to care for average Joe patients in an average US town, then your patients, all they really care about is whether you can help them or not. And at the very core, medicine doesn't really change from country to country. You learn the basics from your medical school, and where you go from there depends on your training and how much you want to put into your training, how much effort you want to put into your training. And so I say all that to say that basically in the end, all that matters is how much you do to serve your future patients and how much effort you put into caring for them, healing them, and being the best doctor you can be for them. So I think that's where I'm going to end this video. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.